ever felt like you've been lied to, manipulated and coerced by a powerful person or institution? In this video, I am going to break down one of the most egregious examples of gaslighting that I have ever come across, that was recently depicted in ITV's drama Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. It's going to be hard to believe that this is not fiction. This is based on real events. Imagine this. You own a small business, a local post office branch, and they've recently installed brand new computerized accountancy software. And anytime there's a shortfall, your contract says that you have to cover it out of your own funds. Now imagine that accountancy system repeatedly finds large shortfalls that you cannot account for, and so you reach out to their help desk for assistance. That is exactly the situation that Jo Hamilton found herself in. Let's take a look at what happened to Jo and how the gaslighting begins.
Private helpline. Thank you for waiting. Hello, how can I help?
Oh, hi. It's Jo Hamilton here from South Warnborough. I'm trying to produce this week's cash account.
Oh, what's the problem?
I know it's probably me because I'm really rubbish with technology, but I've declared my cash, I've declared my stock, I've done it all 3 times and I still can't get it to balance. I hate Wednesdays.
And what does the horizon say?
It says I've taken £2,032.67 more than I think I have.
Okay, redeclare your stock holding. So that'll automatically create a discrepancy, okay? That'll have inflated your cash holding, so now I want you to reverse that difference.
Righto.
So now, if you redeclare everything, it'll balance, okay?
This is so helpful, thank you. Don't go away, stay with me till I've done it. Oh my God. It's just doubled right in front of my eyes. Now it says I'm £4,000 down.
It'll sort itself out, these things do. In the meantime...
Well, I was only doing what you told me.
In the meantime, you'll need to make good the loss.
I haven't got that money, and I don't know where it's gone.
I'm sorry, you are responsible for balancing your account and making good any shortfalls.
Like many people in the 1990s, Jo was underconfident with new technology. She even kind of jokes, "It's probably me, I'm rubbish with new technology." It is always easier to gaslight someone about something they see as a weakness or lack confidence in. Add to this the power dynamics in this situation. The post office can demand money from Jo to cover any shortfall that their accountancy software finds. And it is to their helpline that Jo must turn when she discovers a shortfall. And their helpline fail to find the source of the problem, demand money from Jo, and tell Jo that she's the only one to have ever experienced such a problem. This only adds to Jo's sense that she's incompetent and inept with this new technology, and that she must have done something wrong, perhaps made some terrible error that has caused this problem. And then the situation gets worse. In good faith, Jo requests an audit.
Are you surprised to learn that the audit you requested found a shortfall of £36,644.89?
I've never been able to get to grips with the system.
She's still blaming herself rather than the system.
And when I tried to get help...
As you must know, your contract with us makes clear losses are your responsibility.
Like once, I was on the phone to the helpline and it doubled. It just doubled the shortfall before my very eyes.
Mrs. Hamilton, this is public money.
So this is already a bullying tactic from the post office, assuming that Jo is guilty and has taken public money.
We need to talk about how you're going to pay it back.
And now they're engaging in threatening behaviour. Jo is in a serious situation. Her home, her livelihood may be at risk. Post office seem to be adopting a guilty unless you can prove yourself innocent strategy and treat Jo like a criminal. Post office go on to threaten not only Jo's finances and livelihood, but also her freedom. They threatened to take her to court and prosecute her for theft. If she was found guilty, she would almost certainly have faced time in prison. They offer her a plea bargain. If she will plead guilty to false accountancy, they will not pursue prosecution for theft. However, this comes with some interesting conditions. Let's take a look at this meeting between Jo and her solicitor.
Also, there are 2 conditions to the plea bargain. The post office say you have to pay back all the money.
£36,000, how am I going to do that?
And you must undertake not to blame the Horizon system.
Well, I am guilty, I am, because I did sign all those accounts when I knew they were wrong. But I never stole that money. I never saw a penny of it. You see, I still don't know where it went.
The gaslighting dynamics are very clear here. Aside from taking money from Jo, post office really look out for their own interests and reputation. On some level, they seem to know where the source of the problem may be, but they make it so that Jo can't possibly criticize the Horizon software. They are protecting their reputation at all costs. And Jo continues to be bewildered. She doesn't know where that money has gone, and so she blames herself. And she also sees herself as guilty of having committed false accountancy because she signed off on her accounts. Jo faced huge financial loss and hardship and lived for many years with the stigma of a criminal conviction hanging over her head. But unlike what Jo was led to believe, she was not alone. Noel Thomas had worked for the post office from the age of 17. Like Jo, he pled guilty to false accountancy when he was accused of stealing £48,000 from post office. However, unlike Jo, he spent 9 months and his 60th birthday in prison. Now, you might imagine that after a few such stories, post office might stop to question themselves. Maybe their new accountancy system is not as robust as they would like to believe. But they didn't. In fact, this was happening to hundreds of sub-postmasters up and down the country. I mean, really, what's more likely? That hundreds of sub-postmasters are criminals, stealing from the public purse and from their own businesses, money that they're contractually obligated to repay, or that there's a glitch in some 1990s computer software? Post office never paused to consider the latter possibility. Over a 16-year period, they pursue more than 3,500 post office operators on criminal charges relating to theft, fraud, or false accountancy. Over 900 sub-postmasters were convicted of a crime, 236 of them served time in prison, and 4 that we know of died by suicide. And for a great deal of this time, each sub-postmaster believed that he or she was the only one. These are classic gaslighting dynamics. The entire process is designed to make the individual doubt themselves. Perhaps they have made some terrible inadvertent error, or maybe they really have done something criminally wrong. Surely the other person, the powerful post office, couldn't actually be in the wrong. They remain isolated and vulnerable, facing stigma and shame and bullying in their own communities, and perhaps even criminal prosecution and prison. All the time, the gaslighter, in this case the post office, protects their own reputation and their own interests with little regard for the truth or the impact and the suffering caused to other people. And post office had quite the reputation to defend. At the time, their tagline was, "Britain's most trusted brand." They were proud of their new IT system that they saw as ushering in a new era of online finances, something they believed would be good for the British economy. Some post office leadership were receiving generous financial bonuses. All of these are powerful motivators not to look and see the devastating reality of what was happening to the sub-postmasters. It's not difficult to see how ordinary, hard-working, dedicated sub-postmasters who didn't know that many others were also experiencing the exact same problems would fall prey to this gaslighting.
I say, prove it. Prove that I'm wrong and you're right. Show me the figures. But they can't or won't do that.
Alan.
So now they want to close me down to shut me up.
That's ridiculous.
Because they don't want everyone knowing what I know.
Which is?
That the fancy new computer system that they've spent an arm and a leg on is faulty.
No one else has ever reported any problems with Horizon. No one.
And
There's the gaslight.
Don't believe you.
So, no actual crime has been committed here today?
Well, Post Office Limited is stealing my livelihood, my shop, my job, my home, my life savings, my good name.
That was Alan Bates and his reaction to Post Office auditors bringing in the police when he refused to cooperate with them. I like to think of people like Alan as being gaslight extinguishers. He never doubted his innocence, and from the beginning he was clear that yes, a crime was being committed, but not by him, by Post Office. Now, whilst Alan didn't fall prey to gaslighting in quite the same way as Joe, that doesn't mean that he had it easy or that he got justice. Unfortunately, he did not. Alan and his wife had invested their life savings into the Post Office, all of which they lost. But he never lost sight of the truth. Alan kept meticulous records, and he didn't hide in shame. He spoke publicly and openly about his experience, and he looked for other people who had been through similar experiences. As a result of Alan's hard work, dedication, and speaking out, sub-postmasters became aware of each other. They were able to meet and share their stories, combating the stigma, shame, and isolation that comes from believing that you are the only one. They were able to share their stories with people who could believe that yes, Britain's most trusted brand had pursued hundreds of completely innocent people with criminal proceedings having devastating impacts on them and on their families. As a result of Alan and the sub-postmasters' advocacy, Post Office agreed to appoint an independent investigator, forensic accountants at Second Sight, to look into what was happening. It really seems that Post Office didn't expect Second Sight to find anything untoward. But when it became clear that Second Sight were not going to produce a glowing report of the Horizon software, but had actually found startling revelations about the criminal prosecutions that Post Office had pursued, they terminated their contract with Second Sight and refused to provide them with access to further materials. Post Office then do something that may be oh so familiar to you if you have experienced gaslighting dynamics.
Alan, it's Paula Vennels.
Paula?
Joking. So I was thinking, where do we go from here?
Well, I've been thinking about that too.
Well, great. Should the two of us try and find a way forward?
If you want something done properly, do it yourself.
Exactly.
In this clip, Post Office seemed to be reaching out to Alan in good faith. Let's collaborate, let's work together and sort this out between us. And they actually set up a mediation scheme between the postmasters and the Post Office. Now, had this been done in good faith, it might have worked. But let's see.
Can't think straight. I don't know what to do. It's really very good of you to come. We're going to do right by you, Gina. You can rely on us.
In this clip, Angela van den Bogart from the Post Office is isolating Gina, the widow of a sub-postmaster who died by suicide. Now, ITV do a really good job of making Angela into a real villain and making it really obvious that this is an underhand and very manipulative tactic. But I'm pretty sure that in real life, this probably would have come across to Gina as a genuine attempt to be helpful to her. This shift between being your prosecutor who wields tremendous power and the threat of punishment and being your friend, your ally, and your rescuer is really not uncommon in a gaslighting dynamic. And of course, Gina was extremely vulnerable. On top of witnessing the devastation that Post Office had put her husband through, she'd also gone through the trauma of losing him to suicide and was facing tremendous financial hardship. And Post Office cleverly get her on her own in order to target her with this generous offer. Let's look at what happens when Gina discusses this with Alan.
When Angela came to see me,
Angela van den Bogart came here.
she was nice, I thought. kind. Now I don't know about any of them. I think we just cling to a notion, don't we? That people can't be that bad.
I think what Gina articulates so well here is how our vulnerabilities can lead us to need someone to be something that they're not. We have to kind of believe that this other person that we are dependent on in some way, or this institution that we're reliant on, is fundamentally good. And that might not be the case. And it might be very difficult for us to accept that they're not what we want and need them to be. Now, whilst Post Office may have been able to successfully isolate and gaslight Gina, giving her some financial compensation in return for her never criticising the Horizon software, their gaslighting was really beginning to fail with many of the other sub-postmasters, some of whom were becoming extremely bold in standing up to Post Office.
Preparing for this mediation hearing for months. You will remember that I asked to see this data, the ARQ data from your system, so that I could see if it matched up to my data.
I love how she's meticulous in finding the evidence.
My till in my branch. I kept everything, you see. Now you told me I wouldn't be capable of interpreting the ARQ data because I was a silly woman or something. Anyway, may I direct you to page 7? Now, you will clearly see a 2-hour period when money alterations were being put in, but not by me because I was serving customers.
There is no functionality in the Horizon system to remotely access branch terminal.
Post Office consistently claimed this, but it was also not true.
I just proved there is.
Mrs. Stubbs, we have to tell you now that at this mediation meeting, we are under no legal or moral obligation to do anything whatsoever. And we are working on the principle of the contract, which says that if you lose money, you repay it.
I'm finished with this, actually. I'm finished with you. See, I think you're lying to me.
Mrs. Stubbs, calm down.
No.
There is just no negotiation with someone who's gaslighting like this. I mean, I just love how she just ends this negotiation. She's done. And he tells her to calm down. I love this.
You're patronising me. And I'm going to tell the whole world what you are like.
Well, may I remind you that you have signed a non-disclosure agreement?
I'll talk to anyone who will listen.
She just doesn't care anymore.
I'll stand up with all my papers and I will prove you lied about it.
Mrs. Stubbs, this will have legal ramifications.
Oh, you want to take me to court? I couldn't give a toss.
I just love this clip. Pam finds the courage within herself to trust her own judgment, to stay grounded in reality, which took no small amount of effort. She had clearly done her homework. She didn't give in to threats of legal action against her. She was impossible to intimidate. Now, I wish everyone who was ever gaslit could have the pleasure of such a moment, but this may not be the reality or particularly wise, especially when gaslighting occurs in a more intimate relationship. Pam has the backup of hundreds of other sub-postmasters. She also has the backup of politicians and lawyers in the background at this stage. However, what we can learn from is Pam's insistence on seeing things clearly, her refusal to cower in response to Post Office's threats, and how that allowed her to escape the gaslighting dynamic. This scandal unfolded over many years, and the sub-postmasters garnered sufficient support from British politicians that the UK government appointed a select committee to investigate the scandal. So let's look at what happens when they're subject to scrutiny, and it's worth just explaining that the woman watching on TV in this clip is Alan Bates's wife.
Now, we first requested documents relating to that almost 2 years ago.
And speaking is a forensic accountant, Bob from Second Sight, who investigated the Post Office. This is Nadeem Sahawi, who was one of the politicians on the select committee appointed to interrogate Post Office. This is the actual politician, this is not an actor.
Unfortunately, those emails that were provided were for the wrong year.
That seems to me an amazing error.
Are there any other issues?
Probably most important would be full access to the legal and prosecution files held by the Post Office.
Paula, why don't you make those files available? What's the problem?
The point I want to pick up first, if I may.
No. Answer my question.
It is the first time, personally, that I've heard that. I'm happy to go away and have a look.
They've been told that under no circumstances could they be given those files. Is that right or wrong?
I do not recall that. No. And you could piss right off.
That sounds to me like a shambles. We are hearing from Bob that your organisation has been obstructive to his independent work. Is that right or wrong?
We have provided for every single case detailed, thorough, independent investigation.
Let me stop you there. We've just heard from Bob, who is independent, that you have not. You are the head of the organisation. Will you provide the information? Yes or no?
This is the first time that I have been asked for this information.
Yes or no?
I am not aware.
Will you provide it? Yes or no? Give me a simple answer.
Yes or no?
I am not prepared on behalf of the Post Office to give...
I think I've got my answer. You won't provide it.
No, you have not got your answer. You have not heard a yes or no. I am simply saying at the moment, I am not able to answer your question.
Honestly, I find it quite astonishing that you don't seem to know anything about an issue that is so politically and socially sensitive.
I know a huge amount about this. I know the really important things about it.
You are the chief executive, so the buck stops with you.
It does stop with me. I am not denying at all that there are problems. Of course there are. There are problems in any organisation. But this is about the reputation of the Post Office.
What? No, it's not. It's about people's lives, you moron.
I think the gaslighting is very evident here. Post Office seem to be incapable of giving a straightforward answer to a straightforward question. They're evasive, they change the topic, they go off on tangents, and it takes a great deal of skill and determination, power and authority that of course the Parliamentary Select Committee had in order to bring someone who's gaslighting to this extent to account. It is crystal clear that Post Office's priority is not the truth, it is not accuracy, it is not justice. It isn't alleviating the terrible suffering that has been caused to the sub-postmasters. Rather, they have one priority, the reputation of the Post Office. Now, unfortunately, most of us will not have Nadim Sahawi to interrogate people who gaslight us, but I think it demonstrates just how difficult it is, impossible really, to get someone who is determined to gaslight to be honest or to tell the truth. And trying to get the gaslighter to recognize that they're gaslighting just probably isn't a realistic goal. However, for the sub-postmasters, it was becoming increasingly clear to outsiders that something truly terrible had taken place. Hundreds of innocent people had faced criminal prosecutions. They had incurred huge financial losses and immense personal suffering. A legal team stepped forward to take on the cases of 55 sub-postmasters on a no-win, no-fee basis. They took the Post Office to the High Court, where their contracts were judged to be unfair and the Horizon software was found to contain bugs, errors and defects. The case was ultimately settled outside of court for £58 million. However, by the time the legal team were paid, it left the 55 sub-postmasters with £20,000 each. However, £20,000 was much less than what most of the sub-postmasters had been forced to pay to Post Office when their accountancy software found a shortfall. And it didn't even come close to compensating for the tremendous financial losses that they had incurred as a result of Post Office's action, not to mention the stress of criminal prosecutions, investigations, the impact on their family, the mental torture, prison sentences, and the impact of all of this on their physical and mental health. Despite the inadequacy of the financial settlement, the High Court ruling led the way for some postmasters, including Joe and Noel, to have their criminal convictions overturned. In 2020, the UK government established an independent inquiry into the scandal that continues today. It is easy for most of us to identify with the sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses here. These were ordinary people who suffered terribly at the hands of a powerful institution. But how many of us might have the courage to identify with the gaslighters? Just like it's impossible to believe that hundreds of sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses up and down the country turned into criminals and started cooking the books overnight, so too is it difficult to believe that absolutely everyone involved in the gaslighting here, from the post office officials, their auditors, staff at Fujitsu who ran the Horizon computer system, were all narcissistic psychopaths with little concern for truth or human suffering. If you dare to consider what might be going on for the gaslighters, check out my next video.